Hi there, I'm Mr. Pike, and I will be reading to you one of my favorite books by the Great Horn Spoon. We are currently in chapter 16, The Grave Diggers. They were 2 days finding their way to Shirttail Camp. They followed the South Fork of the American River into the winding Coloma Valley. And were we there?
Yeah.
We were there in Coloma just about a week ago. The summer hills were red and yellow. They passed within 10 feet of old Captain Sutter's sawmill, which we saw and took a picture by. Jack heard everyone in the diggings refer to Sutter as Old Cap, and he knew the miners' yarns or stories about the sawmill. He looked at it now, a rough, timbered shack on stilts at the water's edge. Old Cap had hired a carpenter named Jim Marshall to build it, and that was the way the story began. On the chill January morning in 48, the carpenter spied a yellow glitter in the tail race. He thought it might be fool's gold until he beat it with a rock. That was the test. Fool's gold was brittle and would splinter. Real gold was soft and would flatten out. The lump flattened out like a yellow button. Marshall rushed off to Sacramento, where Old Cap had built a fort, and arrived in the pouring rain with the news. And we also went to Sutter's Fort, the exact room where they did the test of this gold, trying to keep it a secret. He made Old Cap bolt the door, pulled the white cotton rag from his pocket of his wet pantaloons, which were his pants, and revealed his discovery. Jim Marshall was so excited he could barely speak. The two men tried other tests. They got bowls of water and a scale. Using an equal amount of silver, they weighed the two metals underwater, and the gold was heavier. Then they tested the samples with acid to see if they would corrode. They wouldn't. There was no longer any question about Marshall's discovery in the tail race. He had found gold. The news leaked out, and the rush for yellow treasure began. Squatters came swarming into the valley, and now a town had sprung up on both sides of the river. Jack had never seen so many long toms and rockers in his life. "Is this the way to Shirttail Camp?" Praiseworthy asked a miner, standing knee-deep in the water and mud. "Just follow the river. If you hurry, you might get there in time for the hanging. A lot of boys has taken all the day off for the festivities." Praiseworthy shrugged. "We're in no hurry, my partner and I." "It's that Dennis fella. They caught him trying to run off on a stolen horse." Praiseworthy and Jack exchanged a quick glance. The map. Only Cut-Eye Higgins knew where Dr. Buckbee's gold bonanza might be. He couldn't talk very well, hanging from a limb, much as he deserved it, no doubt. "On second thought," said Praiseworthy, "we're in a terrible hurry. Good day, sir." They arrived at Shirttail Camp in an hour. It was a dusty village of round tents and square tents and plank-shacked roofs with pine boughs. "There," said Jack. "There he is." There's a picture of Higgins before they trying to hang him. He saw Cut-Eye Higgins seated on a horse under the limb of a tree. He wore his jippy-joppa hat, and around his neck, a noose. The scar across his eye set his face at a hard squint, and a crowd was ringed around him. "We're just in time," Jack murmured. Praiseworthy whipped out Stubbs' red bandana, blindfold, and quickly tied it around Jack's face. "Partner, you've got a terrible toothache." "What?" "Moan now and then. Good and loud. Come on." Jack gulped and followed Praiseworthy, though through the crowd. A paunchy man with a curly fringe of whiskers from ear to ear seemed to be in charge of the festivities. "Doc," he was saying, "you know the verdict of the jury. As Justice of the Peace of Shirttail Camp, I see you get a good burying as benefits a professional man such as yourself. Now, we don't mind so much that you extracted a gold pouch every time we opened our mouths. Now, there's plenty of yeller around, and that you light-fingered every pocket watch in town so that nobody knows what time it is. You're a professional man, and we tried to make allowances. But horse stealing is a terrible crime, and you got to pay the penalty. Since you said your last words 2-3 times already this afternoon, let's get on with it. Boys, switch that horse." "Hold on," demanded Praiseworthy, stepping forward. "I've got a lad here with a powerful toothache." The justice of the peace threw down his hat. "Doggone it! That's the third one today. We'll never get him strung up." "I beg you, gents," said Praiseworthy. "We've come a long way, and it'll only take a moment. The boy is in pain. Listen to him moan." Jack bellowed and held his hand to his cheek. He wasn't pretending. He was downright scared they might let Cut-Eye Higgins pull one of his teeth. All right, said the chin-whiskered official. "Get the doc down off that horse. Hiram, give him back his forceps and bring the molasses barrel for the boy to sit on." Now, forceps are like long tweezers that they take teeth out with. Back in the old days, they wouldn't give you a shot. They would just pull it out. Jack moaned again and watched the men help Cut-Eye Higgins off the saddle. He seemed a little weak in the knees. They cut the rope binding his wrists in his back, but he let the noose hang around his neck. He looked from Jack to Praiseworthy. It was a moment before he recognized the butler in his red shirt, jack boots, and whiskers. "Never thought I'd be glad to see you again," he said. His face was pale, and his usual sneer was gone. Reluctantly, Jack seated himself on the molasses barrel, and the doomed man clapped an eye on him. "Now open your mouth, son, and stop squirming around." Jack took one look at the steel forceps in Cut-Eye Higgins' shaky hand and decided that a team of mules wasn't going to get his mouth open. "Now let's see them ivories," Cut-Eye Higgins said under his breath. "I'll just tinker. You didn't come to me to have any yanked." Ivories is sometimes what they would call teeth. "We came for the map," Praiseworthy muttered. "I figured. Get me out of this and the map is yours." Praiseworthy nodded again. "It's a bargain. I'll do the best I can, but first the map. I don't trust you, even with a noose around your neck." Cut-Eye Higgins lifted off his jippy-joppa hat and fished a thick, folded strip of brown paper out of the sweatband. It was as if he kept it there only to make his hat fit. When he returned the hat to his head, it slipped down almost to his ears. "Now there's my part of the bargain. Now keep yours. Open them jaws, boys." "Boy." Jack swallowed hard and opened up his mouth. The crowd watched and waited. Cut-Eye Higgins wiped the forceps on his sleeve and set to work. Praiseworthy opened up the folds of the brown paper, studied the markings, and within seconds he saw that the foxy scoundrel had outfoxed him again. The map traced a line along the North Fork of the American River through the Coloma Valley and ended with an X mark that could only be Shirt Tail Camp. "Why, this map is no good," Praiseworthy snapped. "I didn't say it was, except to make my hat fit. But that's the map Buckbee's brother made for before he died. The genuine article. Only in the meantime, them pockets of gold got discovered all over again. By the time I got here, there were 100 miners on the spot." Jack moaned as the best he could with the forceps trying to spread his teeth apart. Their 50-50 share of Dr. Buckbee's mine was worthless. Cut-Eye Higgins had led them on a wild goose chase. "Get me out of this noose," said Cut-Eye Higgins. "That was our bargain, wasn't it?" Praiseworthy ripped the map to his bits. He'd given his word, and he had to stand by it. "Gentlemen," he said, turning to the justice of the peace and the others grouped around him, "I take it you all acted as judge and jury in this case?" "That's right," answered the official. "He got a fair trial, and anyways, he was caught red-handed." "Was he represented by counsel?" "What for? We knew he was guilty." "Well, under what law do you intend to dispatch Doc Higgins from the limb of that tree?" "Why, everybody knows horse stealing is against the law." "What law?" Now listen here, stranger. There ain't a law book within 50 miles that I know of, and I hear that they had one over at Growlersburg, but it was printed on thin paper, and the boys took to rolling cigarettes with it. Speaking for myself, I don't see any reason to let law interfere with justice around here. We never did before. Praiseworthy began pacing slowly back and forth. In the absence of a law book, gentlemen, I recommend to your notice that humanity is also lacking in the case. You're about to string up the only dentist in the diggings. Is that humane? He may deserve his fate. But what of the innocent, whose only crime is to come down with a toothache? Praiseworthy turned and made a grand courtroom gesture towards Jack. Like my young partner here. Now, think of the pain and suffering you'll inflict on those in dire need of a tooth extractor. In other words, a dentist. To narrow it, tomorrow, it may be you, sir, with your cheeks swelled up like a melon. Or you, sir, Mr. Justice of the Peace, with a pain in your jaw as if you'd had a bee for a molar stinging away from morning till night. One by one, he signaled out the gentlemen in the jury, and one by one they found themselves rubbing their jaws as if they could almost feel a toothache coming on. Praiseworthy had never made a speech in his life, but the words rolled off his tongue and he could feel their effect on the crowd. And when he finished, he was greeted with a yell of approval. "He's talking sense," somebody called out. "The doc can't pull teeth if he's 6 feet under." "Well, we could put him in jail." The justice of Shirttail Camp shook his head. "Boys, we ain't got a jail. You know that. The verdict was string 'em up. But I suppose we could delay a sentence until another tooth extractor shows up in these parts. There's bound to be one before long, and then we can get on with the sentence." There was a general approval from the crowd, and 2 toothaches broke out on the spot. Praiseworthy was astonished by the power he'd found in his voice. The 2 miners got in line at the molasses barrel, and Jack was glad to give up his place. "Oh, my tooth has stopped hurting," he said, and Cut-Eye Higgins gave him a wink with his bad eye. "Doc Higgins," said the Justice of the Peace, "you got yourself a temporary reprieve. When you finish with them extracting jobs, you stand still, and we're going to build a jailhouse around you. There'll be visiting hours for anyone with a toothache, but I'll see you hung yet, and as soon as possible." Yet, then he turned to Praiseworthy. "Stranger, I promised the doc a good burying, benefiting a professional man. Might as well get everything ready. Since you appointed yourself counsel for the defense, you get up in those hills and dig him a resting place, and make it 6 feet deep." "Why 6 feet?" "Don't be a cantankerous, or I'll fine you for being in contempt of the court. Everybody knows a grave has got to be at least 6 feet deep. Now get going." The 2 partners returned to their burrow and led him into the hills above the diggings. "You sure made a good speech," Jack said. "It was something to hear. A regular lawyer couldn't have done better. And you saved Cut-Eye Higgins from being strung up." "It's just temporary, which is about all he deserves." They chose a bare spot about half a mile from the camp. It was on a bluff covered with oat straw and overlooking the river. They pulled pick and shovels from Stubbs' pack ropes and set to work. Now listen up. You guys listening? "Fine looking country, isn't it?" Praiseworthy muttered. "Even to be buried in, I guess." Jack tried not to think about Boston. It would soon be time to start back, and all they had to show for their labors was a worthless map. Poor Aunt Arabella, he thought. They would lose the house for sure. The entire trip to California was beginning to look like a wild goose chase. And they got the hole 4 feet deep, and they couldn't go any further. They hit bedrock, and they struck gold. Chapter 17.